This podcast is brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon. Welcome to this Deepbridge Discovery podcast. My name's Andrew Aldridge. Today I'm delighted to introduce Mark Solomons, who's CEO and founder of School Wellbeing Accelerator, also known as Welbee, which is a portfolio company within the Deepbridge Life Sciences SEIS and Deepbridge Life Sciences EIS funds. Mark, thank you for joining us. Great to see you.
No, lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No, great to have you. So for our guests who want to know more about kind of the companies that we invest in at Deepbridge, can you tell us just first and foremost, tell us a bit about Welbee and how it came about, how Welbee came about, and your objectives as a business?
Yes, I'd love to do that. So I've worked with schools and the education market for the last 12 years. And we've seen significant challenges, although in reality they've been going on for much longer. People often think of teachers and people working in schools as they have these long holidays and they work these short days. I think that might have changed a little bit over COVID when people had to teach their own children for a little bit.
Yeah.
But clearly, if you start getting into the statistics around the education market, a third of new teachers leave within 5 years. Right. A third of secondary head teachers and a quarter of primary head teachers leave within 5 years of their appointment, and nearly a half of newly appointed middle leaders leave within 5 years. Okay. So if you imagine any other business, for those out there listening to this, that level of attrition, trying to manage that school, but also deliver the outcomes for children in the classroom, massive problems, rising stress, mental ill health, all these things contributing to this issue. And I've always had a massive interest in education. My mum was a teacher. I've been a governor for 20 years and a trustee and a chair of a board. And I was largely consulting at this time on leadership and culture. Okay. And I was working with 17 schools around Belfast in Northern Ireland. And I discovered one of them had been tracking their well-being of their staff for the last 6 years. Yep. Why that's different is that most schools focus very much on their pupils and students. So actually everything's about students, and it still is to a large extent. If you go and read most things about well-being, people talk about the students, talk about the pupils. And staff are only just starting to be talked about, really, despite all the evidence showing these challenges that are going on. And we're not really, in a rising population as well. We're missing recruitment targets pretty much every year since 2010. So it's kind of a perfect storm. And then COVID came along, and we used to also talk about teaching issues and recruiting teachers. But actually, it's now as difficult to get support staff because many of them discovered over COVID that they could find jobs where they could work from home, get more flexibility, and get paid more. And some people say you can get as much stacking shelves in the supermarket to a large extent as you can as a support staff member in a school. So all these things are better. I was working with these schools in Northern Ireland just before COVID in 2016, but very aware of these issues. And one of them was tracking their staff well-being using a survey. And the other 16 went, we'd like to do that as well. And I kind of went, that's an interesting idea. So I said, well, let me have a go. So a kind of Survey Monkey Plus type product I used. Started running these surveys. It took me 7 hours to prepare a report, and what I was charging for that wasn't sustainable. And it just set me thinking about there must be a better way.
I can streamline that.
Long story short, saw an advert on Twitter, believe it or not, from an accelerator saying, hey, have you got a great business idea? And 6 months later, Welbee was born, and we started our journey really as a new company, and I've been lucky enough to secure investment, a significant chunk of that from Deepbridge, to really start to grow our kind of customer base and become part of the solution. And our key objectives, really, I guess our big one is to be in 10,000 schools globally within the next 5 years. But really the key objective is how do we help people with these problems for the benefit of, I guess, the economy, the society, in terms of both cost, but providing good citizens, because without the teachers staying there, without the consistency of the classroom support, we are not going to get the education that we need, but also these wider issues. So really, I guess it's a passion and a vocation that I really want to do my bit.
And it's, you're absolutely right. It's about you talk about schools being focused on the students' outcomes, but ultimately, I guess that the well-being of the teachers is paramount to that. If you've got happy teachers who are there for a long period of time, that they can embed and do things to a greater level, and you've not got that churn of teachers, I guess that's going to be beneficial to the student outcomes. Just going back to your point about Northern Ireland, were there specific kind of challenges in Northern Ireland, given the kind of the kind of politics and things over in Northern Ireland, or was that very similar to what's going on in the rest of the UK?
Probably the only challenge was funding. At the time, clearly when the government's not standing, which happened a little bit further down, there was challenges getting funding out and making decisions. But in terms of the staff well-being, the home nations, there's very little difference, I guess. In fact, this is a global issue. Teachers in many places, the US, which I'll talk about, no doubt, a little bit later, and in English-speaking countries globally, and other nations, seem to be under the same and similar pressures.
And are there kind of key things that are specific to teachers, or is it kind of about, I guess, staff well-being in general, or kind of are there things that dealing with students and things like that mean it different, or the different pressures?
Yeah, I think it's got to be all staff. Clearly, the main focus goes to teachers. They're the ones in the classroom and seem to get most of the news. But without the support staff, and of course there are more support staff in schools than there are teachers, particularly when you look at those working part-time. Around 90% of them are women as well in terms of the support role. So again, that brings other kind of pressures and the need for us to support through family policies and various other bits. And clearly one area that's causing issues is the lack of flexibility often that's available in schools, both from genuine things like, how can you work from home if you're a teacher and take your children, but also that difficulty of deciding how can we implement what we can flexibly is quite a challenge for those teachers. And just coming back to the point you raised after my first answer, one of our missions is to get over to people, put staff first. And it's quite difficult for some people because although intuitively happy teachers produce better outcomes, the evidence shows that's absolutely true. So we just need to, just say that and think, that sounds about right. We can actually look at the evidence and see that, studies have shown the impact of supporting and improving the well-being of staff has on actually student outcomes. But it's the same in any business if you think about it. Richard Branson's the one who talks about putting his employees before his customers and before his shareholders, because his view is if you train people and give them the right skills, if you treat them well, then they'll look after your customers. And if you're looking after your employees and your customers are well looked after, I don't even have to think about my shareholders because they do okay too. And the principle's the same, but we're just putting it's teachers and support staff, and then it's students and their parents as the customers and the other stakeholders, Ofsted, governors, and all that. So for me, it's a simple message. If we can get this over, and what Welbee's done is enabling a system, because it's a platform for measurement. I suppose we should have said what we do. for measuring staff well-being and tracking it with some clever analytics and getting feedback from staff, but in a way that actually helps them take action. And I think that's what differentiates us to other providers out there. We suggest actions. We built a toolkit. So,
so it's providing objective feedback, but also providing the actions and how you can move things forward.
Actions you can work on, because it's kind of, it's a bit like that poem, The Dash, about, the 2 points from between your birth and death, in a way. The dash for me is the dash between the surveys. The most important thing is what happens between surveys, what action you take. And it's all about improving culture and climate. It's can we create an environment? It's not about giving them cakes or bringing yoga or activities, because that's the easy bit. And it's interesting when you look at the wider market of employee engagement, why so many employees are still not engaged in other industries and sectors. Well, often it's because we focus on these perks and all the things that are easy, whereas really the behaviours of leaders and the culture. And when I come into work every day, do I actually have a good time? Do I feel supported and loved? Do I feel like I belong? Organisations that get that right, they don't need to compete as much on pay. They don't need to compete on the kind of job itself to a degree, because if they create that environment, people will want to stay there. And of course, they'll want to do their best work and can do their best work, and they'll also give more of their discretionary time. So when you add all that together, what we do is help people understand where they are now with an evidence-based survey that's from the Health and Safety Executive, and we give them some suggestions and actions about how to move from where they are, and then we allow them to track and to see where they've gone to. So it's more of a journey and a cycle than a one-off.
And I guess those actions that are kind of recommending things, they've all been tried and tested by in other schools and by other leaders. So I guess that's kind of a part and parcel of the process.
Absolutely, we update them. A lot of them came out of my head originally, having worked in the marketplace, but also from my prior life, which will come into where I was retail director for Sainsbury's Bank. So I ran a national organisation across three cultures really: Sainsbury's, HBOS, as was the Royal Bank of Scotland, and our own business, Sainsbury's Bank, and really understanding and saying, well, how do you get people to work at their best? So since then, I've always had a real fascination with culture. And so, that enabled me to really, build my expertise. I think schools like that, because although we very much focus around the school actions, some of it is brought in from a much wider experience. I was going
to say, if you're, you said your background as well, being governors of school and thing. If you're a governor of a school, yes, you want to have the students doing well. Yes, you want to have the staff being looked after, etc. But ultimately, you are effectively guardians of that school, so you need to make sure that school is being run properly as a business as well. So having that wider business experience feeding into things must be a benefit to them as well, and being reassuring to them.
I think it is, but I think, I have the advantage, I think, with working with schools. I think that gives me a unique insight. A lot of governors who come from that business background, perhaps try and apply their logic, but without an understanding of some of these unique challenges in education, because many things you can do in business. One action I often talk about, and it's something I learned when I was very young as a graduate trainee going into the Halifax where I first started, was I was only 23 and I was taught this wonderful skill called managing by walking about or wandering around, whichever you prefer. And it's probably the best thing I ever learned. And it's not something that schools understand. So we're big advocates of helping them understand that how to give praise and recognition, how to get out there, how to do it in a way that's in the moment. But, because continuing professional development, both in terms of what's there, but mainly the opportunity for it, because these people are always in the classroom. Taking them out is a huge challenge. And as a leader, though, if you imagine I'm in an organisation where I've got an open plan office, maybe, or we can just, like we've done this morning, jump on a Zoom call at 9 o'clock, and we can have some one-on-one time or group time. Really difficult to do those kind of things in schools because most of your people are spread around classrooms and they're timetabled. And they all stop their timetable at the same time. So trying to get around everybody or do one-to-ones or have group calls or catch people in the moment is much trickier. So sometimes it's easier just not to do it. But if you haven't been trained how to do it as well. So for us, it's identifying these real opportunities and helping and educating people around what are some things that have the biggest win for you, your staff, your students, and trying to do that in a way that doesn't add significant taking So it's more about changing how we might do things rather than adding more things to do.
And I guess the key
taking things away.
And I guess the key thing for you was taking that just from being in your mind and being your kind of consultancy-led kind of approach to actually putting that on the platform, creating Welbee, and actually having that as a technical, a technological driver to actually be able to scale this and offer this to multiple schools. I guess that was kind of a key game changer for you personally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you'd have talked to me back in 2017, even early 18, and said I'd be running a ed tech business that had significant funding, and we were, in 400 UK schools and just about to do 3 pilots in the US, I would have thought, what are you talking about? It wasn't something on my radar. I guess it's like lots of entrepreneurs. I had done other things in other businesses. I'd co-founded a national charity that's taken 300,000 students, Olympians, and taking 300,000 students around an Olympian program, about developing an Olympian in any field of your choice. And that's how I moved from banking to schools back in 2000. And
that was going to be my next question. But okay, good.
So I've done other innovative things, but I guess I saw this opportunity, and because, as I said, I grew up with a mum, a primary school teacher, mum who used to bring her books home and stick them in the dining room, and was always under a little bit of pressure, and actually, I considered being a teacher and didn't consciously go, no, I don't want to do it. But kind of my path went the other way from university and what have you. But I've always had this interest. And, as soon as my my 2 children were at school level, I became a governor in the primary school they were at. And then in the secondary school, not one of these, I'm still there. I'm in my 12th year. My son's the school I was at, long gone now. He's 26 and a doctor. So he's kind of branching his own way. But I still get immense both pleasure, and it helps me understand what's going on for my business. And I'll remain doing that. My wife's a trustee, and Teresa was a chair of governors, so we kind of make it a family affair.
Absolutely.
And education is something we often talk about, and I'm hoping the little bit that we're doing can make a big difference to really help thousands and hopefully in the end hundreds of thousands of people enjoy their work more. I have this little image in my mind that we'll have kind of achieved it when teachers and support staff are skipping into work every morning with a big smile on their face, and children are skipping out at the end because they're delivering their outcomes. And I guess that's a little image I keep in my mind that just keeps me going through the hard times. There always are. You can see
the value add that's coming from it, and the future benefits. You talked, obviously, you're starting off at HBOS in your career, etc. Can you just tell us a bit more about that? You touched on that transition kind of from banking to the education sector, because again, 2 very different sectors. It must have been a bit of a culture shock to some degree, was it, or kind of what was the driver for that change?
It was really an accident, I guess. I was fortunate during my banking time to have the opportunity to take an MBA at Cranfield, which kind of helped again give me a little bit more breadth of things. And I went on it's called an executive retreat a little bit later at Cranfield, and I met the then vice chair of the British Olympic Association. And one of the things we had to talk about was our I guess our goals for the future, the things we're passionate about. And he had this vision, having been out there in Singapore when was it Singapore when we won the you might want to edit that or check, but when we won I'm trying to think where it was, when we won the rights to the 2012 games.
Okay, yes. Yeah,
I'm getting slightly older now. And
Singapore sounds right. Let's go with that. That's fine. I'm sure somebody will complain, but yeah.
So we're all human. But he had this vision of creating a legacy program, and I was quite interested. So I said, look, on a pro bono basis, we'd be really happy to help you. So after I was still working at HBOS, I was, and it was still HBOS then, I was kind of giving them a hand, and I helped them found the charity 21st Century Legacy, and they wrote the program, so I was really running the kind of business side, but I learned a lot about obviously schools, and we created the program, got some funding, did some pilots, ran it with a number of schools, got great feedback, and I guess I decided that's something I'd really like to do. So I talked to then Andy Hornby, and so I talked to him via I think I was one away from Andy, and so between us and my boss, I made an appeal saying, look, there's this Olympic program going on, how about letting me get seconded and do this? So they agreed to let me go and do this for a couple of years and pay my salary. So it was a little transition, but at the end of that, I went, actually, this is what I want to do.
Yep.
So I decided to take although I did get some voluntary redundancy, and they were happy to support that. I took a massive hit, as you'd imagine, in terms of moving from banking to education.
Different remuneration levels, definitely.
Yeah, well, in terms of remuneration, and that I stayed because when you're a startup and you've got investors, you don't take the mickey out of your investors by paying yourself a huge sum, and that's fine. I was fortunate to build up a little bit, although it took a little bit of a hit when HBOS did go down, because quite a bit of my stuff was in shares that I've accumulated over the years. But I've got no regrets. The point is, life is you need enough money to kind of function and live on, but ultimately, I guess most of us, when we get to the end and on our tombstone, that old thing, I guess will be nice to think he made a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's quite a driver for me. And
also, Mark, I think what I would add is that obviously we speak to a lot of our investors who invest in our funds, etc. And obviously, investing via EIS and funds like that, there's financial rewards, etc. for doing it. But often the feedback we get is that a lot of our investors like to invest in these early stage companies such as yourselves, where they can see that's making a real difference and actually is adding something out. I think a lot of investors that invested through our funds into Welbee will kind of share that kind of belief that's actually it's if something good can come out of it, that's a key driver.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm very grateful to them for doing it. I mean, it's interesting. I was chatting to one of an IFA the other day, just saying how genuinely, when I received my EIS funding, and I still do, the one thing I still do is my compliance statements. I haven't done those out. It's a reminder of what I'm getting, but I like to open that I guess it's a spreadsheet, isn't it, that I get with my investors in it. And, every time I add a name and address and their investment amount to it, I personally thank each one of them. It sounds a bit corny, but I think, I'm going to do my best for you as well, genuinely. Now, there's no guarantees, as we all know in this world. I think Welbee can do well. We focus on the US, but I'm under no illusions in the market I work in. It's tough. There are no guarantees, and I guess it's that investments go up and down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All the standard risk warnings apply. Yep.
Yeah, and we know startups, a number of them will not get to where they want to go. And all I can commit is say, I will always do my damnedest. I'll work my hardest, and I do work very hard. I will stay focused and do what I think are the right things along with my team to get there. But as you say, I'm very hopeful we'll be successful in the long run. But as you say, if you had a crystal ball, it'd be great. But all I can commit to is working hard to deliver.
Tell you what, Mark, if we had a crystal ball, our job would be easy. But
we wouldn't be in a job, would we? Because we wouldn't need one.
Absolutely. So what have been the key milestones for Welbee to date, or kind of the key moments where you've gone, right, okay, that's been a kind of a key moment that we've got through or achieved?
Well, I think obviously the first one was getting the first investment, which was a small explorer investment. It's just £50,000. It was a key milestone because that enabled us to go to the market and go, right, well, we think there's a problem. Is there a problem?
Yep.
And we think we've got a solution. What do our potential customers think of that solution? And that happened very quickly and was signed off, and I could go into the next piece, which was, okay, go and build the prototype.
Yep.
I had the manual version, and we were making some sales on the manual version. So probably the next key milestone was, can we get this functioning as a digital product and in schools? And we launched our first digital pilot in July 2019, and we then launched around October to start selling it. And by January, February, we got into 100 schools.
Yep.
We had commitment to 100 schools. And so I guess that 100 thing was another key milestone we set ourselves. Obviously, you all know what happened next, because that was January 2020. Yep. And then obviously March 2020 came, and had a massive impact on us. Schools were closing.
Yep.
Of those 100, Some of them still haven't run their survey and kind of were hesitant to do so because people are at home now and all this uncertainty.
Well, I guess they kind of had other priorities whilst they were trying to react to changes and
other priorities.
And also they probably didn't want to do a survey whilst people were working from home in unusual circumstances, because I guess it wouldn't be comparable going forward, would it? But
and all those things, and actually I know people are going to say it's a terrible time and worry. It's why am I going to do a survey to find that out? Yeah. The other impact of COVID was on deployment. Mm-hmm. So although I had a good, obviously a very good relationship with Deepbridge, like most fund managers, they suddenly saw their funds drying up.
Yep.
So the commitment to deliver at the pace we'd agreed wasn't there. So we were getting very tiny amounts, which meant actually we had to kind of claw back significantly what our ambition was. Yep. So in many ways, although we're now saying, well, we're in our third year, really, it feels to me like actually we're probably back we probably had a year and a half if we're looking in terms of our ambition.
And I don't think you're alone in that. I think there's a lot of early stage companies would probably say the same, where they kind of not hibernated, but maybe kind of had to slow down during COVID, etc.
And the frustration's been it hasn't slowed the capital deployment as much as it slowed your. So you spent more than you would have done, I think, because you've recruited people, you started doing things, and you can't kind of then put them in mothballs. So the pace of what of our ambition, I guess, has slowed.
Yep.
And I'm not sure, when I look back, there's a few things I might have done differently, but I think a lot of it is the market, and we are now in 400 schools in the UK. And really focusing on multi-academy trusts now, having become a Confederation of School Trusts partner, recognised supplier, I should say is the correct term. I think the other key thing just before that, though, was about product market fit. Everybody talks about it. I do think we have achieved that.
Yep.
And now it is about the sales and marketing and the challenges of selling to schools that we've got to master. And the feedback on our products is generally first class.
Yeah, I guess that product market fit is, you mentioned the kind of 100 schools being a key milestone. I mean, that's obviously it varies from market to market, sector to sector, but 100 is always a kind of a good sounding number for people to actually show that this is working, it is wanted by the market, and so now to have driven that to 400, it shows that continuity, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the challenge with the UK market, though, is that the revenue side isn't per sale, I guess, isn't where we want it to be yet. Yep. We're adding things to the product that allow us to, so we've got a premium version and we're developing some new things which allow us to do it. But probably the next milestone, I guess, is to run pilots in the US, followed by let's crack the US. Easier said than done in a way, but we went out to a panel, and I'm back there in 2 weeks, actually in Palm Springs at another event with about 50 superintendents and running a panel with 5 of them. It was the last one where we got agreement to 3 pilots, and they're still there, but it's taken longer than we'd like to get them set up, which are things like understanding the legal situation, the data situation, and the various other bits. But probably the best thing about the US is we haven't had to change too much. So that was quite a surprise to us. They were quite happy to use a UK-based survey. And in fact, probably the best feedback I ever heard in the panel, and we've used this now, was somebody saying, hey, you found a gap in the market in the US. You're providing a tool which provides an immediate district overview while providing actionable content direct to our principals, which means we don't have to, because with most surveys, they end up at the top.
They have to make decisions and actions.
Passing it out. 3 months later, people are starting to talk about it. 6 months later, everybody's forgotten the survey's been done, and there's been no action. Whereas the minute the survey's closed, every site, every school with their own dashboard, as well as the overview at the top and the summary report, has got a set of actions bespoke to their site going, these are your results, here's what your staff are saying, some comments as well, and the ability to reply to those comments as well. So we're very hopeful about the US, and so UK is very much now, I think, for us about consolidation, finding some partners who are already in thousands of schools. I've got 2 or 3 conversations going on, a couple with NDA signed, so I can't say more, but actually, can we find people who are already in thousands of schools who go, this is a really good addition to our range, and either white label or through
or distribution agreement or however it's
or distribution agreement we sell. I think that's probably the fastest way in the UK, because even selling mat by mat, which is still what we're doing at the moment. We brought on about 100 schools in the last 6 weeks with about 5 different mats, and we've got other conversations. So that's kind of going to help us grow. But there's 1,400 multi-academy trusts in the UK and 32,000 schools. But selling school by school is quite hard. In the US, there's 14,000, well, not quite, but approaching 14,000 districts. And the revenue we can achieve for the same products is somewhere around over 5 times.
Okay.
So
you can see the scalability, absolutely. Yeah.
So for us, if we get, well, it's interesting. We would have 5 times the revenue we've achieved if we'd have sold the same in the States, and we know that from validating pricing with districts and superintendents. So for us, that's my huge focus now, because clearly that's where the significant times return on investment will come.
Of course.
However, I don't want to forget the roots, because delivering in the UK will still bring good revenue in, but obviously it's still got a duty to help and to support the people where we started.
Have you seen a difference in kind of attitude or mindset between UK and US in terms of digital transformation in the education sector? Are they kind of is it similar? Is the US or UK more open to digital kind of opportunities? Or
I think the US is ahead. I think if you look at the UK, COVID helped. Probably the one thing that COVID did do is force people to look at how to use digital products to improve efficiencies, reduce workload, but also communicate. And Zoom and Google, and also to look at online teaching platforms. Often through those same big players, but others. One of the challenges in UK schools is often too many of them still do not have the network infrastructure. So I still hear a lot of schools moaning about the speed of their internet and things like that. And obviously, a lot of them don't have, or a lot of poorer students don't have access to equipment, although there's been lots of charities and various. And
again, COVID pushed that as well, I think, didn't it? Kind of increase that kind of awareness. And, I know.
Yeah, so there's some hardware and network issues in the UK. Don't yet know enough about that particular thing in the US, but definitely there's a much, I think the US treats suppliers more as partners to a degree than they're doing so in the UK, I think, whilst I've got brilliant relationships with customers in some schools, often you are ignored and forgotten about. And, if you go to an event, you're seen as people on the side, whereas in the US, you're very much seen as people do want to come and talk to you. They're interested in your solution. They're prepared to help develop your solution, which is where we're going to the US, because you get a panel and they will give you feedback, and they often will agree to then work with you afterwards. So it's a much, more
cohesive and collaborative kind of approach, I guess.
Yeah, collaborative and more developed market. And I think the other thing is, for the US, of course, their schools are probably better funded. Biden's put quite a bit of money up front into different projects. And we're talking significant, I think it was 1.9 billion in total over the 3 years has gone in to support things around retention issues, so where we fit in. Whereas obviously we just had the 2.9 billion in the UK additional, but that almost brings us back to 2010 kind of spending. And so over here, it's still, you've got to get over the price hurdle, whereas in the US, we've been told both by the people helping us and others that actually price won't be our issue. So people like our product, price won't stop them doing it, because actually there's a real focus on social and emotional learning, on the sort of things we're doing. And so we're a product of the right time. And for us, it's getting those first few things going, because obviously when you're into a new international market, the first thing people want to do is who you're working with already. Can we talk to anybody? And when you say, well, we've got all these schools in the UK, it works, but obviously once we get to these 2 or 3 pilots properly off the ground, we've run one smaller pilot which worked well, but once we get the big full district pilots off the ground, and assuming they'll be successful, which I'm pretty confident they will be, we will be in a much better position then, because word of mouth, and also these districts will, I'm sure, take it on as a full product. And the other thing I have to say, these are paid pilots as well, and the opportunity of getting a paid pilot in the UK is very rare. It's almost like we don't do that. If you want me to do something, it's free. Whereas in the US, again, and significant sums for a paid pilot, so very much worth doing, just as a revenue in its own right, if you compare it to what we would get in the UK. So in a pilot in the US for a small part of their district, we'll earn as much as a big MAT in the UK. So again, there's lots of reasons why we want to be there, and it's a big focus for us.
And I think you've kind of answered this kind of question, but your next steps then, obviously you've got US rolling out key pilots and then expanding that out, and you mentioned kind of I think the word you used was a premier service or a kind of a tiered system, etc. Kind of what are your next steps over the kind of next 12 or 36 months? Kind of where does Welbee go next?
Well, I think you've just kind of articulated. So a big focus is the US.
Yep.
Get these pilots done, and then when we go out this time, we're not talking about pilots. We're talking about early adopters.
Yep.
So to get some more early adopters, our plan then is to be, once we've got these. So I've got a couple of people in the US. One who has done this as a serial supporter to suppliers. Including I've got to get the figure right, but I think it was a 186 million exit he was part of. So he knows the market really well in the education sector. His plan is, once we get these pilots, he's committed to, actually my first step is to be selling one a week then. Mm-hmm. So how do we sell one district a week? Yep. Which at one level you go, well, that sounds quite hard. When you come back then you go, there's 13,700 and yep. something over there. You go, well, actually, if we were selling one district a week, we'd be more than self-sufficient, one district a week. So for us then, obviously, off the back of that, you'd be growing. So clearly that is a massive focus for us. In terms of, I guess, the product as a whole, we've got plans to enhance the product, which will make it even more attractive. I think we've already got, for an annual survey or biannual survey, with that, with what we do, we are the market leader in my view. We've got the best product. We'll be adding some things which will help us compete with a couple of alternative type of providers, because we'll then have the complete suite and be able to compete with anybody out there. And it'll also offer us a tiered, as you say, opportunity to both add pricing, provide more value, and therefore people will give us a higher annual recurring revenue.
Brilliant.
That's one. And then, as I said, really focus in terms of the sales and marketing in the UK around multi-academy trusts, which are the big groups of schools, and partnerships. So whilst I don't want to forget individual schools, we kind of, we aren't bringing as many of those on because we've turned our attention a little away.
It's not your critical mass. You can't scale by just focusing on individual ones, I guess.
It's the effort, isn't it?
Yep.
If you think about it, I've just brought on our biggest customer, which is 34 schools, Matt. Well, that would have been 34 conversations. Yes, because we're big on a bit, the per school revenue, we give them a discount because we've got to spend less on marketing. It helps them. But all in all, the effort and energy put on it, and we brought on a 20 school trust, and I'm just talking to a 25 and another 20, and we've got a group of 20 schools.
And that's not 20 times the work, so it's the scalability factor.
No, it's not one, but it's probably 3 times the work of an individual school, but you're getting 20 schools. Exactly. So ultimately, and as we grow these numbers and get into the bigger market, and then partnerships, as I say, got a good couple of conversations going on, because again, if they can promote our product out to thousands of schools, and by promote it, I don't just mean say, here's an email. Those partnerships don't work, but actually have skin in the game, and it becomes part of their solution that's complementary. It
becomes embedded then.
Selling it. So, for instance, one I'm talking to has a sales team out there and actually sells things to pretty much every state school in the country, as well as some primary schools. And we're starting conversations. Again, they'll be promoting it and marketing it if we reach agreement, but also their sales team will be out there in schools going, hey, would you like to buy? That's much more the partnership you want, not one where people will just say, well, I'll agree to add it to the bottom of an email, or I'll promote you for a little bit of a cut. So that's what we're working on, really. And over the combination of those is going to see us grow substantially this year. Cost of living obviously hasn't helped a little bit in the UK, but I'm hoping with our plans we will obviously overcome those and grow to the next stage. So my next benchmark really, I guess, is to get to 1,000 schools.
Yep.
And whilst we may not quite do that this year, well, we will. It really depends on the speed of the US. If the US works at speed. But the other challenge being open is the buying cycle is does take a little bit of time, because although you can get your buyer in, often the HR director or others, then you've got to go often to the exec team and sometimes to the board. So there's always that kind of
onboarding timescales always take a longer than
so I say
expected.
so I'd be confident we'll either have that and the revenue that goes with it, or a commitment to that by the end of the year. So we'll have people saying we're doing it, even if we haven't got the whole process or the invoicing kind of action done. So that's my next big milestone, is 1,000 schools.
Fantastic.
And then, as I say, but be growing that hopefully exponentially each year until we're in 10,000 schools, which is, wasn't a figure put out. That's based on market, a reasonable, small market share in the US and the UK market, but would. It's at a scale that compares favourably with other big providers that have exited and gone out. So
gives you that critical mass for
so
options.
Rather than just saying, I picked 10,000, there is some kind of mass behind.
There's method in the madness, Mark. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
I'm very conscious of time, Mark, but I'm enjoying this chat. But when kind of obviously coming from a banking background, working with education, etc., and then effectively becoming an entrepreneur, kind of what I guess were what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, I guess is what I'm asking. What were the key learnings that you kind of took then when you were starting out, or you kind of look back with hindsight?
I guess be a sponge. I was reminded Clive Woodward and his teacup, and also working with people about, people are either a rock or a sponge. So be open to learning. Realise despite my background in banking and, a significant knowledge of leadership and culture, and you think financial kind of ecosystems, actually I realised there's a lot I didn't know. So because we had a treasury and we had all the, so I didn't know anything about really raising money or EIS despite my background. So I had to very much get people around me. And it doesn't matter who those people are. My first coach that was provided by an accelerator I was part of, who kind of rang me, introduced himself and said, I'm your coach, all within 3 days of me filling an application. So this was before funding came. It was about, I think he was 26.
Right.
And, obviously, but what he had was, even at the age of 26, he had a very focused knowledge about how to get a pitch deck together and how to go and get some money, because he'd been taught that. And so, you've got to rely on people. Focus on what your customers need. We've all made the mistake, and I certainly have in my life many times, about building things you think people want, and then finding you've got that wrong. So one of the big things is going through a lean process. It was very much around, look, we are going to go do problem interviews. We are going to build a prototype. We are going to get testing on it. And everything we do still, when we build things, or I'm building new bits, are based on our customers' feedback, and we're in the moment. It's interesting today, as an example, in the press today, that, the government have thrown out, haven't they, 5 of the 10 recommendations from a committee on providing support for the menopause. And why am I mentioning that on a podcast here? Well, we built a toolkit that supports post, and, our latest course actually is helping leaders support people through the menopause. Why have we put that in our toolkit? Because our multi-academy trust and customers said, this is one of the things we're dealing with. It'd be really handy if you put a course on this. So listen to your customers, seek feedback, and build things that they want. By all means, test your assumptions. And I often have ideas, or our team does, and we'll go, oh, that sounds like a real good idea. But before we start development work, sometimes we might do a wireframe or do a diagram and build it and say, let's go and talk to someone and say, and we'll ask some questions. And it's always difficult not to then ask leading questions, but we try our best not to say, hey, here it is. If we built it, would you come? The old field of dreams. So that's the other one. Surround yourself with people you trust. There's loads of founder networks out there. So find people that are doing things that are interesting.
Yep.
As well. Look for people who've gone particularly before you in your area. And not always easy. So I have a fantastic board advisor, but interesting, he's health tech, not ed tech.
Sure.
So he's done exiting, but actually finding people sometimes in your particular market isn't always easy. But again, finding people. If you get funding, don't be afraid to spend some of that on things like advice.
Yep.
And what have you. So I pay him a little retainer all the time, but I've regular weekly conversations. But he's introduced me to people. He is a great sounding board for me. When things
those contacts are invaluable, particularly when you're starting out, to have those contacts.
Absolutely. And use your time wisely, because there's the one advantage is there's massive availability of information out there online, books, name it, and but find the things that really add value, and create some time to do that. I'm part of an entrepreneurs group as well, which is more. I actually pay to be part of a mastermind, but it's interesting, and the founder of that talks very much about spending 90 minutes a day focusing on keeping and winning and keeping customers, and saying, look, if any business you have not devoted at least 90 minutes where you do nothing but saying, actually, how do I win more customers and how do I keep customers? You've not got a business. And most of us have gone through this famine and feast piece. So again, carving out some time every day to say, well, it doesn't matter what's going on in my business. Doesn't always work, but most of the time I stick to this, saying, right, I need to spend some time every day on the key things that will drive my business, no matter what is happening and how busy I am. So again, those will be some of the things that I would, kind of suggest.
Awesome. No, that's, I think, absolutely agree with everything you said there. I think fascinating. I think your first point about being a sponge is hugely important, I think, for any entrepreneur to take on advice, because, I think, I've personally seen pitches, etc., from entrepreneurs where they've obviously not listened to advice and they've gone down the wrong path, whether that be from their customers or whatever. So I think that's hugely important.
Well, if things go wrong, but you did it for the right reasons, you can learn from them. But, you've got to forgive yourself. Sometimes people say things and you build the right things for people, and then they go, no, it wasn't quite, but if you do the right process and things don't work out, at least you go, right, well, I did it for the right reasons. But the other thing, I guess, is to keep, you've got to focus forward, and it's all about the future. But, the only reason to look back is not to beat yourself up or anything. It's just to learn. Say, right, well, if I'd have done something different, how do I apply that going forward? What are the lessons that are important for us?
Excellent. So the important question that I ask everybody that comes on the podcast is about the Deepbridge dinner party. So if you could invite 3 guests, dead or alive, but no friends or family, because we don't want to offend anybody, to the Deepbridge dinner party, who would they be and why?
Yeah, it's really tough, this, isn't it? Because there's so many great people out there. And so one of the things I love outside my work is sport, and particularly rugby union, although I love cricket and other things as well. But I played rugby till the age of 34 before injury, kind of did it at a reasonable level, not quite at the very top where I'd have liked to have done. So my first one's from rugby, and it might be a surprise actually, because it's not one of the Clive Woodwards or Martin Johnsons and much to do that, but it's actually Kevin Sinfield.
Okay. Yep.
And he's quite new to the scene, England's new defence coach. Yep. But it isn't just the fact that he somehow manages to run these 7 ultra marathons in 7 days. Part of it obviously is the reason he's doing it. Having one of his best friends, MND, and then obviously Doddy Weir and others caught in that. But I guess it's also all the feedback you hear from them about what an inspiring man he is, and then reading some of these things about how he's changed his life and, decided he's going to take risks, all because of this. So for me, hearing about his history, both as a Great Britain Rugby League international and one of the greats, into his current journey and the motivations behind things and how he leads and inspires people and gets such followers would be something that I guess would be hugely appealing.
I think that's great. I think everything you hear from his time at Leeds or as a coach at Leicester, etc., is just about his inspiration and leadership, but his quietness with it. He wasn't necessarily a shout and a baller per se. He was always a quiet kind of dignity about leadership, which I think is fascinating.
And it's always interesting because here there's so many historic figures, and yet all my people are fairly recent, you know, and have had some impact more recently. The second one I picked just because I just think the work she's done has been phenomenal. And it might be a bit, I don't know, twee or not, I don't know, but it's Michelle Obama. And you know, yes, I know, I guess that you're in a privileged position to a degree, but actually, you know, looking at the work she does in furthering, I guess, women and particularly girls and coming over to the UK, but just the whole fascination of really understanding, you know, the time in the White House, the background, how she finds time, what drives her, and you know, every time I hear her speak, she sounds very entertaining and very. So again, I think, you know, having her sat next to you and having a really good chat would be really inspiring.
She also kind of to me, it strikes me that she understands how to use her position of power. As a force of God. I think that's quite important.
You put that far better than I did. Thank you.
Not at all.
That's spot on. And of course, the sounds of, you know, Nelson Mandela, and I mean, there's loads of people, you know, but limiting to three. So,
go on, number three. Go on, number three. I want number three now.
So number three. When I grew up, my favourite book was Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
I read it when I was quite young, sort of 10, 11, and I've read it many times in my life. Not for a while, actually, so it feels like I need to read again. So Tolkien is someone I'd love to sit there. I guess the two fascinations with him are, you know, the horrors of war and, you know, getting that first sight, but how he took that and turned it into the fantasy world and the creator. And it's really interesting because, you know, The Hobbit's fantastic and Lord of the Rings, but not all his books are. You know, I've read a couple, you know, others where you just get lost in it and there's various things that go, I don't like that one. But I think just that fascination of, you know, how he catalogued and created those stories and songs and the various other bits. So I think he would be fascinating. And just before you stop me, I am going to do one for my dad as well.
Go on.
There's no one running around us, who I loved as well. So I think you always need a bit of humour at dinner. So I'm going to bring out old Tommy Cooper as well. So I can just say, just like that. And, you know, he's always one of my dad's favourites, but I loved him as well. So I think I'd like the bonus buy for him just to come along and then perhaps he wouldn't be the dinner, maybe he'd be the in-course entertainment.
The entertainment, that's right. Bring his tickling stick, but yeah, that's
Well, that's Ken Dodd.
Oh, that's Ken Dodd. Sorry, I let myself down there. Sorry. That's so I'm too young, Mark. That's what it is. That's my problem there.
Well, part of it is showing my age. I mean, it's really interesting. When I used to do workshops out there, I'd use Monty Python a little bit, and one of them was with the 100 meters for people with no sense of direction, where when the thing does, they'll go off. And I used to show this to say, does this represent schools where everybody's off in the wrong direction, everybody's head's kind of going, whatever. And you realise you're getting old when, I think it was about 3 years ago, before I just started, I was just coming to the end and I showed this. People laughed a bit and whatever, but you could tell it was a middle leader group, and I asked them, you know, what do you know? And not one of them had actually Monty Python, and I kind of thought, well, I need to change my material really. So the Tommy Cooper might not, and I have to say that the event I came to of Deepbridge's on Friday, many of the IFAs were very young. So when I'm doing this, if anybody's watching this, you may not know who Tommy Cooper is. So go and look him up on YouTube, I guess, or somewhere else.
No, brilliant. No, thank you very much, Mark. Really appreciate your time. That was fascinating. I think Kevin, Michelle, Tolkien, and Tommy Cooper would certainly make a very interesting dinner party. So thank you for that, and thank you for your insights about Welbee.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, and just before we finish, I think the other thing, because we haven't really talked about, I guess, Deepbridge in a way, just for me to say how delighted I am to be working with Deepbridge. The approach that they take has just been fantastic for me, because they are challenging. They do their due diligence, but actually what I really like is once that's done and the bits they trust you or me to get on with running my business. There's no micromanagement. The support there when I need it. And I guess they always, with the exception, I guess, of COVID deployments, that was affecting everybody. they've always done what they say they were going to do, both in terms of funding, deployment, or other support. So, that's why I've been really happy. And, whilst there is a little bit of other investment, I've been really happy to continue, obviously, this journey that we've been on. And I'd just like to say, as I'm on here, to everybody at Deepbridge, a big thank you for your continued support to both me as an individual and founder, but more importantly to the business, to keep us going. And I very much hope that we'll all reap those benefits, and not just your investors and you and me, but also people out there in the market that we're helping. So it's a kind of win-win-win-win.
That's the idea. And as you said earlier, when you nicely put it, that when you do the tax certificates, you say a little thank you to all the private investors. It's we do what we do, but we couldn't do it without our investors and the advisors using us.
Absolutely. And some of the investments are not insignificant.
Yep.
As an individual.
Yep.
And you think, gosh, somebody's entrusting that size. Sometimes it might be you making the investment, sometimes they might select it. I'm not sure how it's totally done, but as I say, I will do my best to obviously deliver. I've got a huge skin in this game, as same as everyone else, and so we hopefully will. I should take the word hopefully out. We will do our best to be successful. Well, as I said, I'm confident of our success.
No, excellent.
And I'm confident of the US growth, and it will happen. The key thing always is you just don't know the timing. Sometimes it just takes longer than you'd like because of things happening that are unique to that marketplace. But
you've got exciting plans ahead. So Mark, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your time this morning, and thank you for that.
Not a problem, Andrew. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. If you have any topics you wish to be included in any future podcasts, please email us at discovery@deepbridgecapital.com. This podcast was brought to you by Deepbridge Capital LLP. Deepbridge is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Please note that investments discussed are both illiquid and high risk and won't be suitable for all investors and should be considered as part of a diversified portfolio. The content of this podcast should not be construed as financial or taxation advice. We recommend investors seek appropriate professional financial advice. Any views expressed may no longer be current and may have already been acted upon.